Good evening and welcome to Monday Night Meetup. This is a safe space for honest conversation, thoughtful reflection. I'm your host, the Commonwealth Victim Advocate, Suzanne Estrella. I need to let you know that there's no expectation of privacy. This conversation is being recorded and aired live via Facebook and will be posted at a later date to our YouTube channel for convenience so that folks can watch it whenever they can and wherever it's convenient for them. Tonight, we're really talking about a very difficult subject, gun violence and gun violence prevention. I'm joined by survivors and community service providers, and we're going to take a look at what this means to us personally, what we're seeing and feeling in our communities, and what hope we have for our future. Each panelist was going to take some time to introduce themselves and let you know a little bit about the work that they do. And then we'll get into some questions. If you have questions, you are free to type them into the chat box, and then we will try to answer those as we can. If it's something that we don't get to, we will try to make sure that we get back to you at a later date so that everyone feels that they've had the opportunity to be heard. So again, I want to say welcome to my panelists. I thank you so much for joining here tonight. And like I said, I know this is not an easy conversation, but it's definitely a conversation that we need to have. The statistics are alarming. And I'm really hoping that each of you will help me in adding to the personhood of what we see happening, that this is not just about numbers, that we're talking about our brothers and our sisters, our neighbors, our family members, and our friends. And it's imperative that we be shining the light for something better. This is not the reality that we want to live with, and change is possible. So tonight, I'm going to start off and I'm going to ask a survivor who has worked with the Office of Victim Advocate in the past, and she's a member of our panel here tonight. Her name is Darlene. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about kind of what brings you to this conversation and how you've been impacted. You gotta unmute yourself.
Yeah, something I say frequently, and yet I'm the main offender. Good evening, everyone. Suzanne, thank you so much for having me this evening, and everyone here this evening. My name is Darlene Bennett. I am a survivor, or I should say a co-victim and a survivor of gun violence. My 20-year-old, beautiful 20-year-old son, Justin Emmanuel Wilson, was murdered on June 28, 2009. And there's been a hole in my heart every second of every minute of every hour of every day. However, I find difficulty in finding the right words to really adequately describe why I'm so passionate, because I would say solace or comfort, but some of those things escape me. but I will say I find purpose and I find meaning and I find flight in working every day and speaking to anyone that will lend a willing ear and will accept my compassion and my empathy when we talk about how to journey through this very difficult path of living every day without your loved one. And as long as the opportunities present themselves, I will speak to audiences, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's through public service announcement, whether it's through community forums, or in someone's living room. I will speak about the ravages of gun violence and how they have faces and feelings and broken hearts. And I'm just really honored to be here and to do this work. And I'll continue to do it until I no longer have breath in my body.
Thank you so much. We so appreciate what you bring to the table and your willingness to share your story with us. Next, Adara, will you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you for the invitation to join this conversation this evening. I'm honored to be included in this conversation. And although it is a very hurtful and painful topic, I'm glad that we are creating space for not only us as panel participants, but also for the community that we touch to have this conversation, because it is necessary. And sometimes we have to talk about the hard stuff. So I am Adara Combs. I am the victim advocate for Philadelphia. So I run the Philadelphia Office of the Victim Advocate, which is a newly created office here in Philly, just created this year, which is really wild considering it has been necessary for quite some time, given the vast, drastic increase in gun violence that we've experienced in this city. I'm a native to Philadelphia, born and raised here, an attorney by trade, but kind of went into law wanting to be a prosecutor because I myself was a victim as a child and have been impacted by gun violence throughout my entire life, and just violence and crime generally speaking. Just at the top of this year, I lost my little cousin to gun violence and have lost numerous family members. So not only is this work professional, but it's personal for me. So I am appreciative of this opportunity, and I look forward to hearing what everyone has to say, and also looking even more forward to how we can collectively band together to take back our safety and take back our peace, and build a better future for ourselves and for our children and for our entire community.
Thank you so much. Chardan, will you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to join you all tonight. My name is Chardan Huston, and I am the Director of Community Relations and Engagement for the City of Harrisburg, Harrisburg Bureau of Police. It's a long title. My position as well, I shouldn't say my position, but the unit I oversee is a fairly new position. It's under the Community Services Division, which I oversee 6 community service aides, and they are a direct I should say, I wouldn't say a direct reaction, but a direct, I guess maybe I should say direct reaction to a lot of the violence and situations that happened with George Floyd. I think that the Harrisburg Police Department felt that there was a need to try to call to action and try to be active in their approach to communities and how they approach communities and community policing. And so they decided that there was a need for a civilian approach and trying to bridge that gap. And so we are the liaisons. We worked in tandem with the police officers, but then we also serve the community and really connecting them to resources. And trying to get not only the community to see that there is a place for policing at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, there's a place for policing, but there's a way for it to be done. And there is a humanness that has to be added to it. And we must never forget that. I myself am also a victim of gun violence. My father actually committed a murder back in 1994. And I don't think a lot of times people think of the people who have committed acts of violence as their loved ones being victims as well, but we are because it befalls us all, right? And then also my nephew was killed the day after Christmas last year. He was 20 years old and he lost his life to gun violence. So it has been all throughout my life experiencing, unfortunately, this type of this type of activity. And so I'm excited to be a part of this conversation and to share my story, and to share how, like I said, we can come together to collectively to hopefully find a means to an end, because at some point we have to find some resolve. I mean, the reality is, can we ever, eliminate, crime at its true nature? No, we can't. But if there's a way for us to try to get to the heart of it and try to really get to the nature of it, and really what's driving it, I think that can be a greater conversation. So I thank you guys for, allowing me to be here tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Laura, please introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody for joining us. My name is Laura Madeline, and I'm the executive director of the Souls Shot Portrait Project. And this is an artist activist project that was started back in 2016. And all your stories are just why we do this. It's what we do is we put out a call to artists, fine artists, and we randomly pair them with the family members or friends of victims of gun violence. And the artists and the family member get together, and the artist gets to know who the person was in life, because sadly, most of the people in our portraits are no longer with us. And they create, based on photographs and stories and just getting to know the family and the friends of the person. We memorialize and celebrate the lives. We don't focus on the deaths. And we put the portraits into exhibitions, which travel from place to place for a full year. And we are on our 7th exhibition right now, which represents over 200 victims, which is a very small percentage of who's actually affected. The exhibitions that we just opened the new exhibition of Philadelphia area portraits on Friday night, and there were hundreds of people in attendance, and they're a truly moving experience. And our mission is to move people, to get them to take action in some way. I personally am not a big marcher. I'm not this was what I could do. And I'm speaking for all the artists too. It's something that we can do to make connections that need to be made, and to show people that maybe don't live with gun violence every day, which far too many communities do, to show them the actual cost of this. And our exhibitions travel, as I said, we've been in Harrisburg at the state capitol 3 times. We actually have another exhibition that will be opening at the Susquehanna Art Museum in Harrisburg in January. And we have 2 current in Philadelphia. One is at Einstein Hospital, and the trauma department there had a incredible program where some of the artists and some of the family members spoke, and some of the trauma team doctors. And again, it's all about just what all of you have just been saying. It's about, I hate to even use the word humanize, because it implies that they weren't human in the first place, but just to show the cost and the far-reaching cost of gun violence.
That's powerful. Thank you. So this is my first question, and I'm gonna give an opportunity for each of you to speak to this. But I want you to tell me how working in this space has impacted you personally, even in addition to like your personal loss. How does having to kind of answer to the community or provide information to the community on this topic, how is this affecting you personally? Let's start with Darlene.
I felt like you were going to call on me. I would say for myself, experiencing a loss like this has caused me to look inward and really analyze how I may have responded to people in the past around trauma. And you know how we say, oh, most people mean well. And I really do believe that. However, I do think that there is an intentionality to how we respond and how we step in to comfort and support people. And I think that it just can't be a blanket, a bed of cliches, that it has to be just like the same way if we would consider that if I were comforting someone who had suffered a miscarriage, I wouldn't start by inviting them to a baby shower. You know, I would think about what are the sensitive, empathic, meaningful ways that I would look to support them. And really, it's caused me to look at that, to look inward, really as a knee jerk to many of the painful, albeit most likely unintentional, ridiculously horrible things that have been said to me, and say, oh, I just wouldn't do that. And I thought, first thing I thought is, oh, I really hope that I haven't said those things to anyone. And I hadn't really had a lot of exposure prior to my experience with trauma. And I thought, oh my God, I really hope that I've never hurt anyone the same way that I've just been hurt. So I have spent a lot of time, for those who are willing to hear it, this is really how you should go about. Just start out by asking questions. How can I support you? And let the person lead you down their path. And I've learned how to be gentle with myself, be patient with myself, and extend that grace to others. Because really, at the end of the day, all really we want is to be treated, we want to be treated well, and we should be extending that to others and not to be inquisitive. So I think that for me, the shorter answer to this question is it has caused me to take a very introspective look at myself and then extend that grace to the community. And by doing so, hopefully I can prevent someone else from feeling that same victim blaming, that perpetuating that shame that a lot of times women, we are inherent to do. It's raining, I'm somehow responsible for that. I should have watched the weather last night. I am to blame for everyone catching a cold today because I didn't send out an email blast saying that it was going to rain today. But I think that we naturally can blame ourselves for a lot of things that we shouldn't take ownership of. And if I can help someone learn how to be gentle and extend that gentleness towards other people, because at the end of the day, the person that's losing someone to gun violence right now is not going to be the last person. Just as I think you were saying, Chardan or Adara, that we can just change the face of how we deal with this, but we're not going to end it. But we can interrupt the violence. If we can interrupt the violence, I believe we can do that, significantly and progressively and proactively, every day.
Yeah, that's a great learning tool, though, that you mentioned. It's so important that we remember to ask survivors and victims, what does help look like to you, or what would you like? What do you need? And not making that assumption that we know what's best, or that we know what somebody needs. I appreciate it.
Really quickly, I'll say that when my mother passed away 4 years ago, and I'm sure that my job meant well, and they just sent us some food, but they didn't ask me, is anyone lactose intolerant? They just, here, take this this sauce and this, this pasta and this cheese. And if y'all break out, oh well, but you didn't ask me. You just assumed that we all ate cheese. Everybody doesn't eat cheese.
Yeah, that's true. True. Laura, how about you? How's this impacting you personally?
Yeah, I think what Darlene was saying is it makes me think of the relationships that develop between the artists and the family members that we work with. And the most important thing is just listening and, not offering an opinion. but, I'm speaking again for the artist, we listen and look at photographs and just give them the space and the time, because so often they're loved ones, and sadly, most of them are young men. If they get a mention in the news, they might not even, their name might not even be mentioned. And this is, it's shameful. The whole situation is shameful, but it's really, our families are so grateful that their voices are heard, and that we're taking the time to memorialize their loved ones. And yeah, it's very sad that I see a lot of the people that I've met, they do suffer being blamed by others, subtly but hurtfully, and oftentimes will also take on the blame themselves, which really saddens me, because, in my opinion, the situation has just been, due to generations of inequity in public policy. But I'm not good at speaking about that, but just on the personal level, I think, and thankfully I've never suffered a loss from gun violence in my life, some close calls, but I did have a lot of miscarriages, and I loved what you said about that. It's people want to fix things, and they want to make it, they want to zip past it so that they're not uncomfortable. So I think the listening is huge.
Thank you. Chardan, how about you?
I think one of the biggest things with my role, and how I relate to the things that have happened in my life is not only holding myself accountable, but holding other people accountable for their actions. I think that we live in an era where people don't like to be held accountable for the things that they say and do. And I'm a firm believer that we can't ignore the big elephants in the room. We get nowhere with ignoring those things. And so I think it's imperative for people to acknowledge their self-knowledge, but then also acknowledge others, and acknowledge, like I said, and hold people accountable for the things that they do, and put themselves in other people's shoes. And I know that's sometimes easier said than done, but I think sometimes if we would just take a moment, to step back before we speak or before we act, and to really try to put ourselves in other people's shoes and really think about what would we do, in those circumstances. How would we react? What would we say? How would we feel, in a certain situation, and then hold ourselves accountable for those reactions, and try not to be so judgmental, of other people's stance on things. I understand that we live in a world where we should be able to agree to disagree, and I'm fine with that. But it's also, there's a respect that comes along with that too. And I think a lot of times the respect is missing out of that. And so I think when I think about the challenges that I've had in my life, the trauma that I've experienced in my life, I really, really try to take and think of those moments and think how they made me feel. You know what I mean? And I always think back to, the Maya Angelou quote of, people may always, forget, what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And so when I think about, when I go throughout my job and when I go throughout my life, that's really how I try to operate. How will people remember me? And will they remember me? They may not remember, what I look like, or remember, what I said to them, but how did I make them feel? And so I try to carry that in my position and as a leader. And I think it's important to understand too, your position. your position of power and hold that. And really, are you a boss or are you a leader? Because there's a difference. There truly is a difference. And so I think when it comes to, like I said, just really thinking about, like I said, the experiences that I've had in my life, to me, it's accountability. It's honoring other people's stances. It's keep holding on to my own integrity, and respecting other people's, like I said, positions, and just really trying to have empathy. And even if I don't truly understand, or I can't put myself in another person's shoes, just try to really respect the human side of things. And I think that we forget that a lot of times. And like you said, to treat people like humans is to think sometimes that they never were, human. But I think sometimes we forget about that. We forget that we're human and therefore fallible. We make mistakes. And sometimes we, speak off the cuff, or we, or we say things and we react really quickly without really thinking about what we said. And I think that when we're in these positions of power, we have to be very conscious of that. And to really get people to listen. And again, ask yourself, are you a leader or are you a boss? And what does that truly mean to you? And so those are the things that I think about when I try to relate it back to my position.
Adara, how about you?
When you go last, you have to follow all the things that everybody said. But the benefit of going last is that I've been able to write down some of my thoughts, so I didn't forget them. So I'll say that being in Philadelphia, the one thing that this work has impacted me, or one way this work has impacted me personally, is an increase in fear. And I say that because in Philadelphia, we are at this point beyond 450 homicides for the year, over triple that in shootings, non-fatal shootings. So when you add that together, that's over 2,000 people that the city has impacted, or that the violence in the city has impacted. So I live in a constant state of fear, heightened fear, because all I do every single day is listen to the trauma that wreaks havoc on the community that I have known and loved my entire life. So I think that is something that resonates not only with me, but everyone who works in this space and everyone who has been impacted directly or indirectly by gun violence. So that's one definite thing that this work has impacted me, or one way it's impacted me personally. Another way is forcing me to be very thoughtful and very intentional. So the Philadelphia Office of Victim Advocate was created to kind of serve as a conduit between community and services, to make sure that those who were impacted by victimization or impacted by crime were able to easily access the resources they need, and also have someone to advocate for them holistically. So that's forced me to kind of look at things from a very granular point of view to help individuals, but also from a very macro point of view to make sure that I'm looking at an entire system and think about how to be very thoughtful on the things that I implement, change, suggest on the entirety, and making sure that I'm not assuming what a mother who lost their child to gun violence needs. I'm not assuming what a community who has been ravaged by gun violence needs to rebuild itself, but actually asking and listening and being thoughtful in what it is that my office suggests or implements. So I think that's definitely a personal impact, because I think as a former prosecutor, I was very case oriented, right? Like I'm thinking about this case, this particular victim, this offender. Whereas in this role, looking at the city as a whole, the country as a whole, the state as a whole, you just have to be very thoughtful and very intentional. And one thing that's resonated with me throughout everything everyone has said in answer to this question is stepping away from the policy and the politics and looking at the humanity. And that's just something that has to have been a constant as I've built out this office and thought about what the impact would be. Anything that comes from government is seen as political in nature, but it's important that this work is human in nature.
Yes.
And that is something that I've had to constantly remind myself of every single day that I sit down to do this work. It's not about the office. It's not about me. It's not about the mayor or anybody else. It's about the people that go to sleep every night with one less person in their family. And that is why we have to get up, grind hard, make the changes, do what we got to do, and offer grace to our community and grace to ourselves, but show up authentically every single day.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm so hopeful that we will begin to see more and more of that humanity in all the decisions that are being made. On the, not just in the community level, but on the state level, that we will stop just, rattling off these statistics and numbers and really think about, this is it now. Like, I know there's different levels of impact, but when you look at it, everybody's impacted. The numbers are so great now that it's not just a big city issue, but everybody in the state is being impacted by gun violence. And we just really need to address the people issue that is at the heart of that, and kind of brings us up to the next question. When I think about it, I can't remember the exact date, but the school shooting that happened in Philadelphia, I don't know if they're even really calling it a school shooting because they were actually outside of the school, but when the football team was leaving the practice, and then the number of people that got shot, it's like, I try to imagine what that must feel like to be a student that's supposed to then show up for school the next day. And it's, I can't even like put words to what that would be like. I could think of, when I was in school, reasons why I might be afraid to go to school, but because I was gonna lose my life was never in the picture. So everybody's being impacted. So I want to know what you all feel. What do community responses, what's your hope for what you would hope community responses would look like? And then if you have something that you're doing in your community that you feel like is, hey, this is really working and wish we could see more of that, tell us about that as well. Adara, we'll start with you this time.
Sure. So yes, the Roxborough shooting that happened last October is what, or this past October rather, is what you were referencing when the students were shot after the scrimmage. So, just looking at that particular situation and then also applying that to the entirety, the way that Philadelphia responded to that brought to the surface some things that we need to fix, but also brought to the surface some of the things that we do well at in terms of banding together, in terms of everyone being all hands on deck, trying to support a particular community as the tragedy has occurred, support the family, support the school, support the Roxborough area and the city as everyone responded. So I think the answer to my question, the answer to that question kind of takes form from that. In my ideal world, and I've been saying this since I took this this role earlier this year, at this point, this is an all hands on deck. It really doesn't matter what your discipline, your area of focus, your profession, it really doesn't matter. If we don't band together and everyone do their part, whatever their part may be, and do it well, we will be in the darkest of days, period. And I know that's super bleak and that's not sad. And that's very sad. And that's not something folks want to hear on a Monday night. But it's certainly true. And in my mind, when I look at the perfect community response, it is every agency, every organization, every government entity, whether it be local, state, federal, whatever, doing its part to make sure that we are violence interrupters, as Darlene was saying and Chardan was saying, that we're providing the support on the front end to communities to prevent violence, because there's a lot of violence prevention that happens both in schools, both in neighborhoods, in different areas, and that when something does happen, hopefully at lesser numbers due to the prevention piece that we're working so hard on, that we support victims and co-victims and survivors and do what we need to do to make sure that they don't feel re-traumatized and re-victimized on the back end. So it would be like a full spectrum of efficient, direct, thoughtful response with everyone uplifting their particular portion with the hopes that it doesn't get worse as things go on. So that would be my picture of a perfect world. And all hands on deck, we are all doing our part and doing the work at every level, whatever level we work in, to make sure that we are supporting our community, because that's where we are. I mean, we are literally on our knees as a country dealing with gun violence. And there are so many areas that are impacted. Schools, you just mentioned it. It's crazy to think that even if it's not in a school setting, if a shooting happens in a community, kids live in communities. They hear the gunshots. They're expected to then walk out the house and go to the school bus and get on the school bus and go to school as if nothing ever happened. That's wild. And it's also not practical. When you think about people who live in communities, like how are you supposed to safely exist when you live in fear? So it's just literally an issue that we all have to begin together to address, because it impacts each and every single one of us, no matter where you live. And I think the numbers nationwide have just shown that it's no longer a us problem versus them problem. It's not a city versus a suburb. It's not a county versus a metropolitan area. It is everybody needs to get on board with what we need to do to prevent gun violence, because it's seeping into every crack and crevice that we have. And it's going to take over if we allow it to do so. So we need to interrupt, prevent, and support on the back end.
Right. Now, Laura, I believe like what your group is doing is kind of like a community response. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I absolutely love what Adara just said. And because I wrote down my answers to these questions, and the first word in this answer was outrage. And we all need to be outraged.
Yeah.
And it kind of, I don't mean to bring abortion up, but we need to see men out there protesting about abortion rights too. And in this case, as I mentioned, the exhibition that we have going currently is in Chestnut Hill, which is a very sheltered neighborhood, and they don't live with that daily fear. I mean, we try not to focus, like people have said to us, oh, you should do portraits of the victims of whatever school shooting. And the thing is, with the mass shootings they get a lot of media attention, they get a lot of an outcry, they get a lot of public support, and as they should. But there are communities that live with this fear, like we're talking about, every single day, and it's not right. So outrage is what we need, and we need it from everybody, because yeah, you said it all.
How could a victim family connect with your project if they wanted to be involved with having a portrait done of their loved one or something? How do they connect?
They can just go to our website, which is soulsshotportraitproject.org, and we accept everyone. It's free. We've worked with people that have lost someone 30 years ago, and we work with people that have lost someone 3 months ago. So it's anyone who is willing, and it's the families and friends of the victims that we work with are incredibly gracious and brave to do this, because it's opening up their personal life, their personal trauma to complete strangers, and artists can be very strange. So anyway, yes, anybody can apply.
Great, that's good to know. Darlene, how about you? What are you hopeful for community response? Maybe what would you like to see that you didn't see when you were faced with this head on?
That's an excellent question. And I was thinking as Dara was speaking, so well said too. I would like to see what I used to see. And that's sort of antithetical, because what I used to see in terms of the village community mentality was really what we need right now. Like, we did that as a way of loving each other and supporting each other, and we didn't need it. The crime element wasn't there. There was crime with rules, honor among thieves type of philosophy, if you will, that there was definitely a certain order of, you didn't kill grandmoms, you didn't kill children, you didn't fire off near playgrounds. And though I'm not, advocating rules for for shootings, as much as I'm saying that the big mama, mentality of a child belonging to the entire block, and most children all being raised the same way. I'm 56 years old, and if you put a bunch of 56-year-olds in the room, we could trade stories about how we were all pretty much raised the same way. And though I'm not trying to create a referendum on child rearing, to say that we pretty much had so many common shared experiences that there was just an unspoken safety. And now living in this sense of heightened fear, my heart and my soul says, I don't want to be afraid of any young people, especially those that look like me. And my heart and my soul wants to still be able to gently or respectfully and firmly correct someone when I see them out in community doing something that they shouldn't, but my heightened fear says, I don't want you to shoot me in the shoulder or worse, but my heart is bleeding out. So what I would like to see, I guess, on a larger community, but smaller community scale, is our outreach, our proactive outreach though. So before someone is shot or an argument heightens, I live on a small block, and a couple of months ago, because this is November, so yeah, maybe a couple of weeks after school had started, some children were getting into a fight, and they were pulling book bags down and everything. And I love that a couple of my neighbors, before I could even come outside, were already like, oh, no, we're not doing this. Like, we're not gonna have this. And I think that we need to have a more global, but community global type of mentality, that we're going to be proactive with our outreach, so that children feel loved. If I hear someone say one more time, these young people today, the leaders, there's a break in how we have probably as a collective let down our young people, because if we were all raised the same 50 years ago and we weren't doing this, and we see a large group of a swell of violence this way, we have to look to where they're getting their information, and how are they being loved, how are they being regarded, how are they being seen. And really, don't we all want to be seen, and we want to be understood, and we want to be heard, and we want to be valued? And if we're not getting that, then we're going to make the noise in whatever way that looks like. A child will make the noise and want to get the attention, whether it's good attention or bad attention, just to get the attention. And so I think I would like to see our community all hands on deck, before things get darker, that we can say, hey, I see you, and you might not believe me, and the best thing you can do for young people is keep showing up, because you can't fool them with a flash in the pan and say, oh, I'm here for you, I care for you, I love you, and you won't show up next week. If I'm only saying that this week, I have to show up the next week, and the next week, and the next week, and not be afraid to feel their anger, and take those blows on the shoulder. I know you're angry. Okay, I'm not going anywhere. You can't hurt me. You can't push me down with your disappointment. I'll keep showing up, and then you'll start saying, oh, wow, she didn't bend when I told her that I don't want to hear anything. She keeps showing up. Now I feel like I can trust her a little bit. I think that's where we need to be.
Wow, that's good. Suzanne, what do you think? What's your hope for community response?
I hate to say it, but I feel like we also live in a generation of social media has destroyed a lot of our connections and has desensitized our young people. And there's this lack of loyalty to their communities, and to their surrounding, and to their surrounding friends, partners, and peers. There's no loyalty anymore. Even in working, we're currently, the city of Harrisburg, my division is working on the GVI grant, which is Group Violence Intervention Grant, and trying to help reduce gun violence. And what we've seen is, these gangs / groups are coexisting with each other, but they're not really loyal to one another. And so to me, it speaks to me a higher sort of echelon of understanding for them too. They don't see, in my opinion, they're not seeing loyalty in their homes. So if they're not seeing loyalty in their homes, then they're not, you know, they're not willing to have loyalty amongst themselves. And if, again, it goes back to accountability. We need to start holding our parents and our children's parents accountable for their actions. And, you know, the reality is, to me, I feel like what goes up must come down. And so legislation, it starts with legislation. It starts with some of these gun, you know, legislation laws that we have that are allowing it to be easier to obtain guns, to be able to have access to guns, and not hold people accountable for these sort of straw purchases and things that are taking place. I'm not saying, obviously, you know, our economy, a lot of all that has to do with how our community is ran. But I agree with Ms. Darlene in the fact that it takes a village a lot of times to raise our children. And so what we've seen time and time again is a lot of time in our vulnerable communities where there's a single parent household, you know, and that's a reality. That's a fact. I would love to say that that's not something that exists, but it exists in our world and in a lot of, like I said, our vulnerable communities. And to add another piece to it is the mental health piece. There has been a tremendous, I should say, even with COVID, I think it revealed a lot. I don't know if it was always brewing and then it just really revealed itself, you know, during COVID. But what I've seen, and also working with this GVI grant too, is that, and then working in my field, is there is a lot of mental health that is not being addressed. And it is leading to a lot of our children being incarcerated, a lot of our adults being incarcerated, a lot of violence. And it's like, and for me, I think when we can start to deal with some of these mental health pieces, and connecting people to human resources and connecting people to, you know, financial resources, you know, I don't believe at the end of the day that people just really want to go out and commit crimes. No, I don't think that that is the end goal, but I think that there's a reason that they're going out here, whether it's because they need to put food on the table, whether they are the head of the household as a 14, 15-year-old boy, they're the man of the household, and they feel like that they have to take care of their younger siblings and, you know, and take care of their younger family. And so they feel like they have to put food on the table. And so this is something they have to do, you know? And so I don't know. When we talk about, you know, overarching goals and things that we would like to see, I would really like to see our community start to band together. Again, start holding ourselves accountable for each other's actions. The mental health resources, having more access to that in our more vulnerable communities, and realizing that. And especially in our African-American communities, you know, there's sometimes a stigma, you know, with the mental health piece. And it's like, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say that, you know, things aren't okay, you know, and it's like we've over the years have generated this idea that, you know, we can't ask for help. And it's like, no, you know what I mean? It's really the exact opposite. We need to ask for help, and getting that message out there and making that outreach more, you know, prevalent in our communities. And like Ms. Darlene also said, is letting people know also too, that it's not just one person. It's going to take a lot of us to keep the ship running, you know, and keep it afloat. And it's all these other little pieces that keep, you know, to make this whole picture greater. You know, and just this understanding, I think sometimes when we're in our vulnerable communities, it's like the idea of the children of a lesser God, you know what I mean? Like they're not, you know what I mean? Like they're, you know, people, you know, it is what it is. And it's like, no, like their problem is your problem. I'll never forget one time I was walking downtown and under a bridge, it said, soon the poor will have nothing left to eat but the rich. and it was real, and I was like, wow, like,
Yeah.
it was a real statement. And it really, had me pondering for a while that's, people's reality. And so it's like, once we expose, a certain reality to the masses, it's like, you can't keep ignoring it. We're getting to a place where we cannot ignore gun violence anymore. It is becoming, it's infiltrating us all, the rich to the poor, it's infiltrating. And so how do we combat it? And I feel like we have to face it head on. We have to acknowledge it. We can't keep ignoring it and pretending that it doesn't exist or that it's not our problem. No, it's everyone's problem.
Yes.
So for me, I don't know, it's all of what everybody said. But for me, I will say, in doing what I do, mental health, if I could have one area that I would like to see increase, it would be that, because our young children are suffering, the amount of young children that are trying to take their lives, you know what I mean? And teenagers and young people that are, committing acts of violence against each other. It's like, come on, like, you know what I mean? So for me, it's the mental health piece, and really, like we said, being there on a consistent basis for our children.
Awesome. Oh, tremendously good points. Yeah, you wanted to add something, Lauren?
Yeah, I just in all of the conversations that I've had and other people on our project have had with families, we don't ask about the deaths, but they frequently will tell us what happened. And they're all incredibly stupid, like mistaken identity. There's a stupid argument. There's I can't think of them all, but anyway, I was talking about this with someone else once, and they said, yeah, the common denominator is there's a gun there. And, this is, somebody's making money off of providing all these guns. And, I mean, the mental health certainly is a big aspect, and especially a suicide. Again, when there's a gun there, it's just so easy. It's so easy to solve the problem, and you don't, without thinking, because it's there. And anyway, I just wanted to bring up that point, because we can't lose sight of the fact that there's a lot of money being made on these guns that are out there.
Yeah, that's a good point. And kind of leads us into our next question. When we talk about gun access or prevention, tell me if you have a program in the community where you're working that's addressing either one of those issues that you feel like, yeah, this is working and we could duplicate this across the state. Is there any way, either a gun violence prevention program or something that your community is doing to kind of reduce that access to guns? Like, I've heard some stories, some people will say that when they have those drop-offs and you get so much money if you turn in the gun, some people say they don't think that works at all. Some people think that it does work. Do you guys have any opinion about that, or any other program that you feel is really leading towards prevention or reducing that access to guns?
I'll just jump in really quickly and say that I actually had asked about the buyback or gun program, because a neighbor was talking to me about it. And I was like, I don't think that our city has that. I've never, heard about it. So I went to our commissioner, asked, if this was a program that they had ever implemented before. And he said, yeah, we tried it. And he said it worked, and then it didn't. He was like, it wasn't super successful. He said, what you have is a lot of like older people would be turning in like their guns, not the people that really needed to, where they really needed to get the guns from. So he was like, he said it's not a bad idea. He's like, we just maybe need to figure out the way to make it really work for the people who were really trying to get the guns, from. And then I'll also just say, and I don't know, I can't really speak to whether this project or grant is really working or not, only because we're only about 9 months into the group violence intervention grant. I will say it's been a heck of a job trying to get it off the ground and to get people understanding what it is, and bringing all of these different entities, whether it's the U.S. Attorney's Office, state attorney's office, judges and district judges, and getting community providers, getting a police together, it's a lot. It's a lot of getting people on the same page. So I will say that I never realized that the undertaking that it would be to just literally get people on the same page, on the same wavelength, and to have the same conversation, and to keep having the same conversation. So I would love to say that I have metrics to say that it's working or not. We're not there yet. I'm hopeful by the same time next year that we may have something more fruitful to be able to share and say, that it's been, positive, or it just the reality of maybe it is what it is. But that is something that my department has been trying to bring to fruition. I will say it's not an easy thing to do. But we are, confident that we're going to push through no matter what. And because again, it's not about, me or anybody else. It's about trying to take back our community in the best way possible. So.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear that. Darren?
So I'll jump in. So I think my thoughts on this, and I will put the disclaimer out there that they're not backed by, statistics. I'm not a statistician or anything of the sort, but based on my observation, in my work in this space, both on the criminal justice side, but also on the policy side, is I think that it's a multi-pronged approach. As opposed to one particular thing works best than another. So for example, Philadelphia has I don't know if it's actually called a buyback program, but they have a similar model where you can come and bring your handguns, and there's some incentive there. Either it's anonymous or there's a buyback or what have you. And while maybe that is not the most, to your point, Chardan, successful thing, because it's not necessarily targeting the people that we want to target, it does have some measure of success, right? So that's one thing. And then Philadelphia also does have a GVI model. That's another thing. We have another model where we target not necessarily those who are gang affiliated, but the same type of model, but for anyone that is at risk. That's another model. You have the credible messengers that go out into the community and have kind of walked in the same shoes as our demographic or our target demographic in an attempt to interrupt their the cycle of violence. That's another model. So I just think I say all this to say that there are so many different ways that we need to kind of attack this one issue that I don't know that it's, I want to say worth, but I don't mean that in terms of valuation, but I don't know that it's necessary to say that this is the only one we're going to do. If they all have some level of impact and they're all successfully taking some amount of handguns out of the hands of people who are perpetrating crime, then let's do all of them. That's my opinion. And I know, like I said, that Philadelphia has so many different approaches because we have to target every single demographic. Not every piece of violence comes from a gang, but some do. So let's address that. And then not every piece of violence is, because of a lack of support and care in the home. Maybe it's because of some exterior factors. So let's address that too. So it's a multi-pronged approach that I think has been helpful. I think it's still in the works, obviously. So, obviously it remains to be foreseen if it has been as effective as we'd like for it to be, especially when you add COVID and the disruption that caused into things. But I think the multi-layered approach that Philadelphia has been trying to implement has been helpful because it just meets every demographic where they need to be met, as opposed to assuming some high level thing about community and what is necessary to interrupt gun violence. But ultimately, what I will say is that it comes down to legislation. Like, we need stricter laws in terms of gun access. We need to address how easy it is in some areas to get handguns. We need to address things like polyamorous guns that can be shipped through the mail and can't be detected and things like that. So there's a lot of different things that we need to be doing. But I think that is an area of heavy impact that needs to be propelled forward in order to see the mass scale decrease in access to handguns that we all desire to have.
Yeah, I agree. I think what I've heard everybody kind of bring out in their comments is how interconnected we all are. And because if we're going to live together on this planet in any type of safety, then we all have to make this our business. It's not this person's problem, but like we said, this is a community problem. This is every citizen's issue. And us coming together, all hands on deck, is what we're gonna need to make a difference. But I appreciate you guys just lending your time and expertise to the conversation. And like I said, what I'm hoping that this will most do is just really point people back to the personhood of the issue, that we're not just talking about percentages and hundreds and thousands of numbers, but we're talking about people, lives that we lost, people that could have been contributing something to the strength and wisdom of our communities that now we will forever be without. So just really kind of keeping that focus, because it's so easy to want to turn away, I think, because it's an ugly topic. So it's easy to not want to have to deal with that or pretend that that is not happening, but until it happens to you. So I'm, like you said, somebody mentioned about sounding the alarm, people being outraged. I'm hoping that this will help to kind of create that outrage without somebody waiting for it to be, oh, it was my sister. But you can be upset enough that you want to contribute to change because it was anybody's sister or somebody's father, and realizing that loss does devastate us all in some way, even when we don't exactly know what we lost or what that person would have contributed. We've all lost. So I want to end the program today by sharing the video I mentioned earlier that Darlene has worked with our office in the past, and she helped us create a crime prevention video that kind of shares a lot of these same sentiments. And it may take a few minutes for that to come up and play on the screen, but we are going to share that with everyone. So we can just end with that.
One of the greatest sounds in the universe is a child's laughter. A happy child laughs 400 times a day. Unfortunately, just 3 months into this year, in my city, 93 lives have been stolen by guns, 329 human bodies violated by bullets. That's nearly 1 murder a day, 4 shootings a day. So many lives forever changed. Gun violence doesn't just kill the ones we love. It lessens our laughter. It silences our smiles. It breaks our hearts. What do I do with my empty seat at the dinner table? With a silhouette where his college graduation photo would have been? With my anticipation of his first daddy-daughter dance? Tell me how we prevent what happened to me from happening to another mom who wants her child to live long enough to be old. Tell me how we heal the hate and stop the pain. Can we start over? Do you remember what it felt like to walk down the street without fearing for your life? Sleeping with your doors unlocked? Knowing and loving your neighbor, or at least caring enough to work it out without shooting it out? When did we become the society that kills over a parking space or shoots into a crowd where children play? How do we get back to love?
Crime is preventable. What we do and say matters. We all have a part to play in creating safer, caring communities where justice thrives. The Office of Victim Advocate is the state agency with the duty and authority to advocate for the individual and collective rights of all crime survivors. The Sexual Offender Registration and Notification Act was created to inform communities of known sex offenders. For more information, visit pameganslaw.state.pa.us. For more information on all OVA services, visit ova.pa.gov.
Thank you all so much for being with us tonight. And we so appreciate the invaluable work that you all are doing to serve your communities. And like I said, our interconnectedness, we're all working in this together. And at any time you think of something that the Office of Victim Advocate could do to assist you, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. It is important for us to keep those doors of collaboration and communication open. Thank you so much for being on the program tonight. We'll see
Thank you,
our
Suzanne.
viewers next month.
All right, so nice to be with you all tonight. Good night.
Likewise. Thank you.
Good night.